When you start talking about herd immunity, it's my understanding it's going to take about 70 to 85% of the population has to be vaccinated in order for us to achieve herd immunity in this country. The allotment of vaccines, however, that went out recently is only sufficient to inoculate about 2% of the population. When you look at that, late last year, say Pfizer cut its end of the year supply projections by half due to problems with supplies of raw materials. What can be done to mitigate what is apparently shaping up to be a supply crisis?
I don't think it's going to be a supply crisis when you get into February, March, April, May. We'll reach herd immunity. The federal government has contracted for enough vaccine to vaccinate essentially everybody in the country with a prime and a boost, except for the Janssen product, which is only requiring a single dose. So it isn't a question of an ultimate crisis. It's a question of where we are today and tomorrow and next week. Ultimately, we will get to being able to vaccinate. I hope that we achieve that, Bishop, by the mid to end of the summer, because we're going to go through the priority vaccinations through January, February, or March. By the time we get to April, I would hope that it's like open season. Anybody can get the vaccine, whether you're in a priority group or not. And then if we vaccinate people through April, May, June, July, and August, I hope that by the time we get to the fall, if in fact what we're trying to accomplish here today is successful, namely getting people to be vaccinated, we could reach that 70 to 85% of the country by the fall and the end of the summer.
One of my concerns, and I think why fora like this are critically important, is, we talk about general numbers. So for example, with herd immunity, we're talking about the general US population. But if I'm going to predict, is that, especially since we have concern that certain groups or populations may, talk about vaccine hesitancy, my concern is that the coverage will not be uniform and there will be populations left vulnerable to the disease. I'll give an example. We've seen how for measles, for example, very recently, that unvaccinated people, New York, places in the South, et cetera, pockets where people are vulnerable to a disease that they absolutely should not be because there's an available vaccine. So if I were to predict, and I think this is the message to get out to Black and Brown people, is that, certain groups may achieve herd immunity and certain groups may not. And, that will serve to continue to fuel this cycle. So again, just to get the message out, herd immunity really has to be tied to vaccine acceptance. And I think those have to go together.
When you start talking about herd immunity, and you start talking about how nomadic we are, we're traveling all the time, we're intercontinental, we're moving from place to place. It's not like we're going to stay in America and not travel abroad. So when you start talking about herd immunity, are we just talking about America, or are we going to be free to travel?
Well, you could travel. That's one of the reasons why we want everybody to get vaccinated, because if you go to a country in which there is a lot of infection and you're not protected, you certainly are vulnerable to getting infected. We see that with measles. I mean, it was just mentioned right now about measles. So if you are vaccinated against measles and you go to a country in which measles is a prevalent infection, as we see in so many developing nations, and you're protected, you're protected. But if you're not, the fact that there's herd immunity in the United States as a nation, that 85% of the people are vaccinated, and you're not vaccinated, you're not protected when you go out of the country and go to a place where there's a lot of infection. Herd immunity means that in the place where you are, the virus has no place to go because most of the people are protected. But if you're not vaccinated and you get on a plane and go to a country where there's a lot of COVID-19 going on, you got a big problem. And that's the reason why we're encouraging people, particularly the vulnerable people in the African-American community, to get vaccinated, because you want to protect yourself and your family and your entire community. And you could do that. It's a personal responsibility and a community responsibility, because the more people that get vaccinated in your community, the less chance the virus has to circulate in your community.